Aye.
Why then?
By my watch, that's 2 o'clock, so welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Audit Committee. Thanks to everyone who's come, thank the members of the public, the Forfeit State as well. There's no fire alarms planned as far as I'm aware, so if the alarm goes off, it's the real thing. So please exit the building, go down the ramp to the right-hand side and assemble adjacent to the cathedral. We're going to start, as I usually do, with a round of introductions, and if we start with Councillor Breckles.
Hi, Councillor Breckles, Councillor Troopers Hill, St George Troopers Hill.
Ade Adebayo, independent member.
Simon Cookson, independent member.
John Geeser, Councillor for Avonmere from Lawrence West.
Jonathan Hacker, Councillor for Stockwood.
David Wilcox, councillors for Lockleys.
Patrick McAllister, Councillor for Hottles and Harborside.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christina Event, I'm part of the external audit.
Hi, Barry Morris, Audit Partner at Grant Thornton.
Beth Bowers, Audit Manager at Grant Thornton.
Hi everyone, Denise Murray, Director of Finance, BCC.
Alison Mullis, Deputy Chief Internal Auditor.
Neil Hewitson, KPMG.
Joachim Adenisi, Corporate Risk Insurance Officer.
Matt King, Governance and Performance Manager.
Jo White, Programme Manager. Emily Hewitt, Programme Manager.
Daphne P. Anderson, Director of Property Assets and Infrastructure.
Graham Clark, Head of Revenues and Benefits. Kevin Smith, Operations Manager, Revenues and Benefits Service.
Apologies, John Smith, Executive Director, Growth and Region, Parliament's Chair.
Maria, Head of Service and
Bumther, Chief Internal Auditor.
Alison Taylor, Clerk to the Committee.
Councillor Steve Pearce, St George Central Ward, and I apologise for my late arrival. Due to being a party group leader and acting Lord Mayor, it's been so long that I took a wrong turn.
Councillor Guy Polney, apologies for my lateness too.
Okay, thank you everyone, much appreciated. Next thing, I'm just going to highlight a couple of changes to the agenda. So we have item 12, which is the risk management, the corporate risk report for Q3. We will hear that after item 8, which is the external auditor's report. And item 15, which is the Children and Families Transformation Programme update. Unfortunately, the lead on that, Vanessa Rosen, isn't able to be with us today, so we will defer that to next time and hear it alongside the other reports that we've got lined up for the March meeting. Okay, apologies for absence. Have we had any, Alison?
No, Jo, no apologies, though I note that Councillor Cole's not here.
Okay, thank you. And I'm aware that Mr Cookson has to leave a little bit early today, so that's been noted. Okay, next thing is declarations of interest. Has anyone got any declarations?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say that although it's declared on the website, I am the Council's nominated board member for First International Shipping.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, now next we've got the minutes of previous meetings, and we've actually got 2 sets of minutes to note as a correct record. The first is from the meeting of the 20th of November 2023. Has anybody got any comments on those meetings or on those minutes? happy to accept them as a correct record? Yeah, you see nods, so that's good. And then the next was the Extraordinary Audit Committee of the 18th of December. Anybody got any comments on those minutes? No? Happy to accept? Nods all round, thank you. The next item is the action sheet. So are there any comments on the items which are listed on the action sheet and the responses we've had from previous meetings? There appear to be no comments, so we shall note that. So next we have public forum. So we've had 3 statements and 2 questions. Two of the statements were from Councillor Hopkins, who's not with us today. So we'll move on to the statement from Mike Oldreeve. And if you can summarise your statement in around a minute or so. Thank you.
Hello everyone. As regards Councillor Hopkins wasn't here, so just bear with me a moment. Yes, in terms of my statement, I obviously draw your attention to the Stepping Up programme and what appears to be issues with the governance there. Particularly, the programme seems to have been set up on a very small initial pilot and then rapidly escalated into approaching, well, probably well in excess of $750,000 if you include staff time and other things. And officers seem to have jumped over themselves to find ways around procurement on this programme. And I know that on one of the waivers, it says, this programme is the first of its kind in the UK, and it was felt the expertise and skills required may not, those are my emphases, exist elsewhere, and the award served the council's best interest. Now, feelings aren't facts, and one of the ways of establishing facts would be to do some market testing, which is what tenders normally seek to do, or at the very least some market research to demonstrate that the expertise and skills required to run this programme didn't or do not exist. Serving the council's best interest, I'm not sure how the public's best interest has been served by this programme. I note again that the Director of Finance, Director of Resources, has raised her own concerns about this issue. I could say more, but that's it at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have debates on public statements, but your statement has been read and listened to and noted, so thank you for that. We then come to your questions. Your first question is quite lengthy. Are you happy if I
just want a response on my the issues that I raised?
Yes,
because obviously the issues there sort of indicate unlawful appointments by the monitoring officer and head of legal services, and just a generally poor management of the members' complaints process.
Okay. So you've addressed that to myself as chair and to the audit committee as a whole, and to summarise your question, it's how would we rate the work of the Values and Ethics Committee in managing the member complaints process, and then you list a number of examples of things that you've got concerns about. I'm going to give you a brief answer first, and I'll open it up in case any other members of the committee want to respond as well. But I would think that's the first thing I'd note, it's not my committee, though it's a subcommittee of audit. And I am on the Values and Ethics Committee. I would note that the committee itself has voiced concerns. Obviously, there's been a number of public representations, and we did voice concerns about the data that was supplied to us in terms of the complaints, summary of complaints made. We also had concerns around the independent persons issue, and that the complaints process, the new complaints process that was proposed, was rejected by members of the committee and is due to come back with revisions to reflect our concerns. I think the other thing I would say is that, I think members of the committee have demonstrated that they have got concerns about historic reporting of complaints and handling, and that we are looking for ways in which that can be improved in future going forward. And that I'd also note that that I'm aware that members are exploring other avenues to try and improve the process in future. There will be another meeting of the Families and Ethics Committee before the end of the civic year, which the new complaints process should be approved at, and that will help clear the slate for future reporting. I think that's how I'd put it. Has anybody else got comments that they want to make with regards to the questions that Mr. Aldrieve has raised? No. Okay, you get a brief supplementary if you wish.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to know on what guidelines and basis the monitoring officer is using to determine that complaints are politically motivated, together with the unlawfully appointed secret individual that I was referred to in my second question. He decided that I was politically motivated in my complaint. Any guidance that I can see on deciding, this is this is just whether it is a complaint or not under the legislation, this is what he was deciding. Any guidance I've seen refers to politicians in terms of politically motivated complaints. My concern is that this is a mechanism for avoiding scrutiny by labelling members of the public politically motivated. As I said before, I've got no links to any political party and I never have. So I want to know what guidelines did he use in making his decision.
Okay, that's not a question I'm equipped to answer today. But we can, I can approach the monitoring officer with regards to getting a response to that.
And did he share those guidelines with this so-called independent person who the public know was never an independent person because they weren't fully appointed?
Okay, you've had your supplementary on that one.
Thank you.
Yeah, you do have a second question. I assume you've seen the written response to that, which is that the monitoring officer will seek the consent of the persons concerned and release this information if they agree. I'm not in a position to add to that. I'm probably not in a position to answer any supplementaries, but and the monitoring officer's not here today, so.
No. Do you want to get a supplementary?
You can, but like I say, probably not able to respond to it.
Okay. Sorry, can you remind me what the question was? Because I lost track of it.
You were specifically asking what three individuals the monitoring officer had
appointed. Yes.
Or I'd referred to as independent people.
Yeah. In response to his question, actually, his answer, I don't think it's within their gift to say if they're willing to identify themselves or not. I mean, I think they're appointed by the council, so they're providing, they're acting in a public capacity. I don't know whether it's appropriate they should be secretly appointed.
Okay, noted.
Thank you.
So that's public forum, and now we move on to note the work programme for the rest of the civic year. I assume members are content to accept that as read. Lovely. Okay, right, so the next item is item number 8, the external audit plan for year ending 31st of March 2023. I'd like to welcome Barry as the new auditor, and I'd like to thank, in his absence, John Roberts for his work over the years, because I didn't get an opportunity to do that in person in this forum. I have passed on the council of the committee in private to him, but this is to put that on public record. But over to you, Barry.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pass on those thanks because I'm seeing John on Wednesday evening, so I'll pass those on. Chair, I'm joined today with Beth, who's familiar to the committee, who's the manager leading the audit, and also Carissa, who's in charge of leading the audit work for us. So we're presenting to you the plan today, and I'll let Beth take that through you. But just so you're aware, the audit is well underway already. We are seeking to complete the audit by the end of 31st of March 2024. And so we're working all great guns. Now, previously we've had some delays in obtaining information from officers. We've agreed an appropriate escalation policy with Denise and with colleagues in the finance team, and I'm pleased to say that to date that escalation arrangements are working well and the audit is on track for the end of March. So I just want to give that assurance because I know in prior years there's been some delays. I'll now hand over to Beth to talk you through the audit.
Thank you, Barry. So we're presenting our audit plan for 22-23. If I take you through some of the key headlines, we're then more than happy to take any questions on the report. The report starts with some national context and sets out the background under which we are undertaking our audit work. And then on page 42 of the pack is where some of the more specific elements related to Bristol start. On page 43, we note the significant risks that we have identified for the audit. The significant risks, for reminder for all committee members, are those which we deem have the highest risk of material misstatement within the financial statements. These significant risks will be familiar to any committee members who've sat through previous audit plans and audit findings reports. They remain the same as in previous periods, and we have not identified any new significant risks during 22-23. We also set out some of the other key areas here, including the materiality threshold that we have set for the audit, the threshold at which we deem that the accounts would be misstated by a significant enough value that we would need to discuss with management adjustments. And within that, we also set out lower thresholds that we work to as auditors and that we would deem to be trivial enough or insignificant enough that they do not require reporting to yourselves as committee members. As Bristol prepare group accounts, this is a group audit, so we will undertake some procedures in relation to the group, which is highlighted here. And it is also worth flagging that value for money work is the other arm of work that we undertake in our remit. But as members will remember, we presented a joint value for money report for the 21-22 and 22-23 financial periods, and that was presented to the audit committee in July 2023. So that work is, whilst it will remain under review until we sign the financial statements opinion, it is substantially complete, and at this point in time we don't anticipate any adjustments to that report. The report then picks up in a little bit more detail on each of those areas, which I won't talk you through, but again, more than happy to take any questions. One area I would just like to highlight is on page 52 of the report pack, where we set out the detailed group audit scope and risk assessment. There's been a slight amendment since the point at which we produced this report, in that we will undertake a small number of bespoke procedures in relation to Bristol Waste Company that will require us to review the work of the component auditors who have been appointed to audit those accounts, rather than us undertaking analytical procedures at a group level. It's primarily due to change in values since we undertook our initial scoping work compared to the final numbers that have ended up in the final audited accounts that PwC have now concluded their audit work on. Further through the report, again, we just add more detail on materiality thresholds. We've set materiality at a level that is slightly higher than in previous periods. And we have set a separate materiality for one area of the accounts that we feel is subject to more scrutiny from the users of the accounts, that is the senior officer financial remuneration disclosures, where we would expect all of those disclosures to be within a much lower than £19.2 million threshold. So we've set a lower materiality of £20,000 for that specific disclosure. We set out our team on page 59 of the pack, including key deliverable dates, such as coming to the audit committee today to present the audit plan and our plan to produce and present the audit findings report in time for the March committee. We also set out the team members, all of whom are in front of you today, and some of our key roles and responsibilities. Further on in the pack, proposed audit fees are set out, and these are, as you will have come to expect in previous periods, what we've tried to do is we've tried to set out the fees year by year so that you can see any additional fees that have been charged for a number of years. So anything new should be clear that it's new in 22-23. And we also set out any independence and non-audit services. It is worth flagging the one specific independence issue that we raise within the audit plan, which is the Council's Chief Executive is an ex-Grant Thornton employee, but we have consulted internally on this matter and have obtained approval that it is, we have sufficient safeguards in place to allow us to continue as your auditors. As a previous employee, your Chief Executive did not have dealings with the external audit team, and therefore it is appropriate for us to be able to continue in our role. I will leave that there, Chair, but happy to take any questions if members have any.
Thank you very much. Jonathan, I can see your hand, and David next.
Thank you, Beth. I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind. Is the 31st of March 2024 a statutory deadline? And what's the consequences if it's not met?
So, thank you for the question. The 31st of March is not a statutory deadline. There is a statutory deadline to conclude on all audits for the years 2022-23 and prior periods, but only 22-23 is relevant to Bristol City, by the 30th of September. I should have said that that's an expected statutory deadline. It has not yet been, whilst the intention has been confirmed, it has not yet been formally written into statute, but it is the deadline to which we are working to. So we are still aiming to conclude by March, but there will be no consequences if, for example, we have to sign on the 1st of April instead.
Thank you. And are you confident that from your side you have sufficient resources to achieve that? And also from the council side as well. I believe that the council have put additional resources into the finance and valuation team. And do you have confidence that the council will be able to deliver as well?
So from our side, we have recently added additional resources to our team to ensure that we do have a sufficient level of resources to conclude in that timescale. And as Barry mentioned earlier, we are seeing really promising signs from those escalation processes that have been put in place. At this point in time, we are on track, and all of the work that has been delivered to date is the work that we had planned to deliver. We are not behind. In a few areas, we are actually a little bit ahead of schedule, which is always a nice place to be in, but we can only comment on where we are to date. If things continue as they have been, we should be fine to sign at the end of March.
Thank you very much, Beth.
David?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Barry, Beth and Chrissy, for your report. On page 48 of the Big Bundle, you talk about a evaluation on a 5-year rolling basis. Does that mean that 1/5 of Bristol's property estate is being re-evaluated in 1 year, or do we do it in one big jump in 5 years?
So in reality, that is the minimum term that the CIPFA code requires revaluation every 5 years on a quinquennial basis. However, a lot of organisations, including Bristol, choose to value either large items or more specialised assets on an annual basis, so that a large financial value and financial proportion of the estate is valued on an annual basis. So while there will be some assets that are not valued for another 4 years after the year in which they are formally revalued, the majority of the larger assets are revalued more frequently than that. The Council also undertake an assessment using various indices to consider whether those that have not been revalued need to be valued and considered if there is an indication that their valuation has moved significantly since the last time they were formally revalued. So that's another process that helps to identify any potential material errors.
Thank you for clarifying that. And on page 49 of the Big Bundle, can we have some idea of how big the investment is that the Council holds in First Corporate Shipping and what our return was, please?
return question would not be one for us as external auditors. In terms of overall values, the last few years in the financial statements, it's been in excess of around £25 million, but that's on a fair valuation basis, so it's not necessarily the same value that was paid in order to purchase the shares.
Got a supplementary to that, David?
Can one of the officers tell us how much money you made from our first corporate shipping investment, please?
Excuse me, joking. Sorry. And also is that we prepare within our accounts, there's a schedule of all of our investments, the investment value and the investment return. So that will be there in the accounts that have been, sorry, not in accounts, but in the council's budget. That schedule is there every year, so you can actually review that. Without me going in to have a look at the moment, it's in the regions of about £2 to £2.5 million will be the annual return from that investment, but it will give you the value and the expected return. Apologies.
Thanks, Denise.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Gita. Okay. Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. On page 10 of the small pack, sorry, page 10 of the small pack, which is, so I'm looking at the small pack here, page 47 of the overall pack, you identified management override of controls as one of the significant risks, but state that this is sort of a presumed risk under regulations. I was wondering if there's any Bristol specific context that would mean this would be on here anyway, even if it wasn't for the presumed risk, or if this is just there because it has to be.
The only reason is because there's no specific Bristol-related risk that would cause us to elevate this higher than any other organisation. It is purely because the auditing standards that we have to undertake our work and adhere to require us to have this as a significant risk. It's to reflect the influence that senior individuals within any organisation, whether it be a council or a large FTSE company or an owner-managed business, can influence on other employees of an entity.
Thank you.
Adebola.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Beth, and the team. Quick clarification point from me, also in relation to your risk assessment. If we look at page 15 of your pack, I believe, which is 52 of the entire deck, regarding the risks identified for the other group entities, you've listed none. Surely in performing analytical procedures, there will be certain risks you're concerned about. It will be useful to understand why you stated none for those entities.
Of course. So in relation to risks identified, I appreciate that the title is not as clear as it could be. It primarily relates to the significant risks. So whilst, for example, Bristol Waste Company does hold assets, they aren't of a value that is significant enough to the overall group audit that we would deem there to be a significant risk that they would be materially incorrect within the financial statements. And so that's why we've answered none. That's one specific example. It's not us saying that there is no risk at all associated with those accounts. It's us flagging that there are not any specific significant risks that we need to identify within the group financial statements as a result of that individual component company.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple of questions myself, and one it's a sort of typo, but just for it just reads a bit oddly. On page 28 of your pack and page 65 of the overall bundle, you outline a sort of series of fees over the years, including the other fees that get charged to bits of the authority. and then you compare that figure with this year's audit fee, and it looks a little odd, it looks a little out of kilter, because it looks like you've taken fees from 2 years and then compared it with 1 year's worth of fees. So I think the situation is better than it looks, is what I'm trying to say.
So the ethical standards that we work to require us to disclose any work that we have undertaken that is non-audit related during not only the period that we are undertaking our audit work, but also the financial period as well. And because prior period non-audit work will have happened during the 22-23 financial statements period, i.e. the 1st of April 22 through to the 31st of March 23, we have to disclose that as well. And because we will start, if not have concluded, a number of those pieces of work in 22-23, we need to disclose those as well. And that's why we flag them against just the 1 year of audit, because it's the 1 year's audit plan that we are recognising here.
Okay, thank you. That's very thorough explanation. I did have a couple of questions, and it comes back to questions around about the confidence of hitting that 31st of March deadline / informal deadline, however you want to put that. And that was to do with items that required input from not just the authority, but from potentially external. So I know in previous years, for example, the Port Authority or First Corporate Shipping valuation, you've approached external valuers. And I'm also aware of things like public submissions, questions to you as a result of public consultation can be eaten to the time you've got available. So you said before you're on track, if not slightly ahead of schedule, fingers crossed. Have those things, are those things already in train as well? Because obviously those are the things that could potentially hold things up if they're outside your control.
So our work plan starts in most cases with the risks that we've identified in this particular plan, the risks that we deem the highest risk to the financial statements, and a lot of that work is well progressed. We also, wherever possible, we do communicate with anyone who is an external body who will be supporting us in audit work, or who will be supporting the council officers in their responses as early as we possibly can. So for example, we engage an auditor's expert to support us in the work on property, plant and equipment valuations. They have already undertaken a large chunk of their work and reported back to us on that. So we've concluded on the vast majority of work that we need external support on. Something always has to come last in an audit, and so that's why I caveat that with, at this point in time, we are absolutely on track, but we just don't know until we get through all of the work. But both sides are very committed to this 31st of March deadline.
Yeah, and I think I can probably add on behalf of the committee as a whole that we'd also be quite keen to see that 31st of March deadline met for a variety of reasons. Okay, are there any more comments? Guy.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a quick one, but obviously later on the agenda the committee will be looking at the corporate property, exactly the right, I think property management programme update, obviously, which includes an update on the properties that the local authority is planning to dispose of, or that disposals programme, and reading that concurrently with your the risks identified within the plan, which included or which pertained directly to the valuation of properties, valuation of land and buildings, and valuation of investment properties. I was just wondering in what two ways those things were connected. Or is that something you can comment on?
I can comment on from our perspective as external auditors in that they are connected in that they relate to the same balance that flows onto the balance sheet and the financial statements, which is the overall value of property, plant and equipment, which disposals from that balance will reduce it, and valuations either increase that balance or reduce that balance. We as external auditors have not identified a significant risk in relation to any disposals of properties. generally speaking, it's because they are more measurable than, say, a valuation, which is something that we have identified as a significant risk, because lots of inputs and assumptions change on an annual basis when you are identifying the value of the property. For example, if you chose to sell your house today, it would be worth one price. If you chose to sell it in a year, it would probably be worth a different price. The same thing happens to all of the council's assets. Whether or not they sell them, they need to be held at that valuation at that point in time when the financial statements are produced. So it's slightly more complex than being able to determine those assets that have been sold during the year, because generally speaking you've got a purchase price for those already and monies have exchanged hands. So that's the difference between the two things and the connection as well from our perspective as external auditors.
Oh, you've got a supplementary guy, and then I've got David.
Oh, thank you. No, yes, I do have a supplementary, if that's okay. No, it was just to say, if it's not too prosaic to make the comparison, though, it does feel a little bit like in the middle of selling one's house, someone says, oh, the valuation may be wrong, if that makes sense. And I was wondering, I suppose this is probably a more important question for the later agenda item, but I was wondering, given that disposals process is in two stages, how, as you say, there'll be a purchase price for anything sold to this point, but it sounded as though we would be getting this report back whilst the next round of disposals is happening. Is that correct?
I think just for clarity, so the audit that's underway at the moment is for the financial year 22-23, so it's the year that ended the 31st of March 23. The pipeline of disposals that are taking place now and that will be enacted as part of the programme that you'll hear about later will be 23-24 and beyond. So quite often when we are looking at disposals, we will always look at what is the net book value and ensure that the actual assets being disposed of are actually going to have a financial benefit and not lead to an impairment to the accounts. So that will be part of the assessment prior to any disposal. And some of the work that Grant Thornton will do as part of that exercise ensure that we've appropriately accounted for the disposals in actually reversing those out of our books in terms of assets as well as we go forward. But the two, there's obviously a bit of a timing lag, the fact that this is attributed to 22-23, but it will form part of that work and they do come together later on upstream.
Thanks, I'll bring it back up later on in the agenda then. Thank you.
I look forward to it. David.
Thank you, Chair. One last quick one. On page 52, where you talk about the group audit scope, you do mention Bristol Energy, or B 2020. What is left to do with Bristol Energy, please? And can we have some qualification about what the limited scope might add? So the individually significant investment might be, please.
So within our group scope, we have just noted all of the entities that have currently or in the past been consolidated into the council's group financial statements. In terms of B 2020, the values associated with that company now, given it has primarily been wound up whilst still not quite concluded as far as I am aware, the values are minimal, hence there not being any individual significance flagged in the second column of that table. None of the values within the accounts are above or even close to the materiality threshold that we set for the overall council group financial statements threshold, and therefore we do not need to do detailed work. We include it in there for completeness sake to state that as auditors we have considered it. We've identified that it is a group company still, but because there is nothing of significance enough to warrant it impacting on the accounts materially, we do not intend to undertake any further procedures.
That is good news, thank you.
Okay, thank you, committee, and thank you, Beth. If there's no further questions, then we are asked to note this, so I shall consider it noted, and we can move on. So the next item is the corporate risk report update from Hakeem. We're asked to review and comment on the risk report update, and what I'm going to propose is that if you talk about the report itself, and we have any questions on that, and then we move on to look at the 2 risks that we've identified that we want to look in a little bit more detail, which is the CRR 55 risk of program-based and unregistered provision, and CRR 26 ICT resilience. But we start with the report itself, that'd be great.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Just to start with the 2 risks that you like to, first Fiona will not be able to make it today because she's having the meeting, and she's going to give, I've not heard any feedback, but we'll give the feedback on that. But also have a feedback from the team, comprehensive feedback on that as well. For Q3, you will have noticed from our report that we've sort of increased the level of accountability and responsibility regarding risk reporting. We have 1 critical risk, 25 high risk, 5 medium. Still 1 opportunity there, although there's been lots of questions about the opportunity in the last few meetings. And then we have 3 external or contingencies risk. The critical risk, one of those that will be interrogated. The improving risk, we have 2 of them, which is the potential for fraud and corruption due to a lot of work that's going on at the moment in the council, and also the adult social care provider and supplier, possibility of them failing. But also, one of the things we've been engaging with the senior leadership in the last few months is to delegate the responsibility of the accountability at the officers level. So at EDMs and DMTs now, even some of those risks that we've been reporting the last few years here, we're now checking that actually the assurance and the responsibility to monitor the effectiveness of those controls actually sits at that level, and then we can begin to use the senior exec for more decision making. And so that led us to looking at a couple of risks that we have. 1 deteriorating risk, which is the winter flu. My assumption is that by Q4 we'll be able to have a view of this. It's just a prediction that we might have a spike in number of people going to the hospital in the winter, but thankfully I think it's been good so far, but we'll get the clarity in the next few weeks. 2 risks being proposed for escalation, 58 and 59. They both have proposed mitigations at the moment. For 59, start with 58, there's a plan for further funding, which is sitting at the exec level, just to be able to respond to the pressure and the kind of highway assets. We're seeing increase in claims because of the regime to put more budget to maintain those assets. So the colleagues are working on that, and they'll be discussing it this quarter. Also for the planning statutory decisions, lots of backlogs. Again, there's a mitigation in place to fast track the outstandings, to bring all the outstanding within this quarter as well. So that's continuous. And then we have a couple of risks which we've been reporting for the past few months or few years for de-escalation. Although based on our criteria, within 19 and 20, we found that some of these mitigations are ongoing, and rather than having a long list of risks coming to the exec every time, we're worried that we might have perhaps in the future 200 risks here and we have a short time. So we're keeping an eye on those risks, we'll be reporting them, we'll be checking the effectiveness of the mitigation. But we want to begin to escalate emerging and new potential threats and opportunity for visibility and governance while we keep an eye on the existing ones. So this risk, even though we're proposing for the escalation, they are not going away until the mitigations are fully implemented and we see the reduction in the threat level as well. I think one more thing we've introduced, again, we thank for the CFO has been encouraging us to look at interconnectivity of risk. So we're beginning to now understand relationships between risk, some risk which we've been managing effectively but have other consequences. So we'll be able to begin to identify risks that have relationships. And this will help us to be looking at dependencies where if we are able to mitigate one risk, it will have consequences in other threats around the council where we can begin to link them together, and then we can have a coordinated effect, our efforts towards managing those. So we've listed those. Some are linked to CRR report, we highlighted them there also. For Q3, we have 10 new mitigations in driving efficiency of the risk, and also there's the feedback on the Q2 report I brought regarding the RAAC risks, and I'm happy to report that so far we have 1,203 currently identified as will not require survey, and just about 333 currently surveyed, and additional 264. So there are lots of efforts just checking the council's exposure in terms of this emerging risk as at Q2, but we'll find out we are on track on that. And also you'll be aware of the Barton House risk assessment we've supported throughout that process, and that's gone to different areas as well. Also, static risk, we've talked about risks that have been static for over a period of time with no movement. We've challenged a lot of them. Some because the project or the program that will mitigate that is quite a long term, and some because also they're required still until when they're monitoring them. So, but what we've done is to ask for assurance on those that have mitigations that have moved. We have 2 of them. Some are still outstanding, but because the projects are still ongoing, we've now sort of also just identified them, something we're going to keep an eye on effectively as well. And also we look at some of the risks that are perhaps not visible to the members, but hanging in the council, the kind of high risk, but not being escalated. Just check whether it requires bringing to the attention of the leadership. And those also have been identified in Appendix 3. So far we're beginning to see officers a bit more engaging, lots of activity, deep dives have gone on this quarter, beginning of the year, lots of services proactively engaging, look at the actions that we're beginning to look at also how this affects our financial budget as well, vis-a-vis also our performance. So that's the update for Q3, and we hope to improve on that quality further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions or comments? At the bottom, I can see your hand.
Thank you very much for your report. Very useful. Just so we're clear, you've proposed a number of risks for either escalation or de-escalation, which is useful to see, but reading through the pages, you have a risk tolerance score. Shouldn't that be the trigger, the measure for consistency as to whether we escalate or de-escalate a risk? What's the criteria you're using separate from that?
It's still the same, but what we're doing in terms of, if we're not careful, we're suspecting there are lots of other new emerging risks coming through. So the escalation is not necessarily we do not be reported for information, but it's handled at EDM level. The exec actively managing it. And we're not discussing that if there's a major deterioration from what we know consistently, some of them have been here for over a year or 2, just managing it. So do we want to keep all this risk just there? Or do we want to, if they have a long time in terms of mitigation, or do we want to begin to escalate the critical ones for decision making? And if we don't do that movement, we'll have backlogs, or we have long list of risks, and it might be overwhelming for members, for exec, to be able to actually see the significant decision making. So my concern now is the fact that we use this information for effective decision making in the council. And so that's why I say you'll still see them. We're going to be reporting no risk, but for visibility and focus at every point in time, we'll bring the critical ones. And except the director tells me, oh, I need help, this is not working, then we flag it up again. But at least they are handling it and they're managing it.
Thank you, Chair.
David?
Chair, are we at the stage where we're talking about individual risks?
Well, we could be, unless there's any more questions on the report as a whole. Is this, sorry, when you say individual risks, is this one of the risks that we...
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Can we move on to If you ask your question, then we'll move on to that then.
So my question is about CRR 55. Children placed at unregistered provision may be at risk. This risk has been at 28 for the past 3 quarters. And the amount of details on this particular risk statement on page 148 of the big pack is really lamentable, considering there have been cabinet papers dealing with how they're going to mitigate the risk, i.e. setting up 2 children's homes in my ward in Lockleys, in the one Lockleys development. Why isn't that information shared in this risk? You're taking steps to actually mitigate the risk, but you're not including this data in here. So I'd really like to see a re-evaluation of this risk, detailing what you're actually going to be doing, please.
Okay, I'll feel back, I'll mention that to Fiona.
So,
somebody's in.
Yeah. So Hannah Gillett's here to deputise and answer. So.
Hi, Judy. I'm in place of Fiona.
Is that working? There we go. Yeah, in place of Fiona, who's unfortunately not here. She's in Knoll West dealing with a community event following the sad incident over the weekend. So yeah, completely recognise that point, and we are taking a number of steps to address that. Exactly as you said, we've got quite a large-scale sufficiency programme that's now taking place to increase the number of children's homes, including, as you said, 2 homes have just been acquired and approved by Cabinet last week in the Gorham Lockleys development. Additionally, we have received funding from the Department for Education to redevelop 2 existing properties into children's homes. There is a national sufficiency shortage, and it's felt really especially acutely for our most complex young people, so that's who we're going to be prioritising through that programme. So absolutely we have a number of steps to take, and yes, we can definitely update that and make sure that that's really clear in reports going forward.
Thank you. And perhaps it's going back to the previous statements about how risks are actually processed. If a risk is at its highest level for 3 quarters, perhaps it needs special tweaking, and more information actually needs to be supplied, because people on audit committee will call it out, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, that's completely fair, and we'll take that away as an action to make sure that's looked at and resolved.
Okay, Patrick.
Thank you.
Sorry, Patrick. Denise wants to respond to that point as well.
I'll just come in and respond to that. And I think there are assurance reports being prepared for CLB, etc., in relation to this risk specifically. It may be an area that you want to have a look at as a separate item in the exam session to talk through. I think it's probably worthwhile indicating that the risk isn't attributed to the same children, because around here we have to recognise that we have a lack of sufficiency of placements, and as a result there is generally a plan for those that are actually in our care at present to put them into regulated placements, but there is always a potential risk of churn as well, and that others will come in and there is insufficient placement. So whilst we may be addressing the issue presently, and there may be a plan to put a children's home in place or create those, they have to go through a process in order to become regulated, and then in reality if we don't address the bigger issue in relation to sufficiency, then there's again a risk that it will materialise. So I think it is appropriate that it remains there, and it is appropriate that it remains at 28 as well, but I think just to give the committee some assurance that there is a lot of focus, and we can present you with a detailed report, but it wouldn't be in your risk register. So that's not where I'd expect to see that, but colleagues can probably share with you some of the details that's in the assurance report, the safeguard and assurance report that they present and share with CLB, but it will be under an exempt session and run through that with you.
Thank you, Denise, and I think we'd like to take you up on that offer, because it is a serious issue and serious risk concern for the authority. Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. It's on the same issue, actually. I was just wondering how many children we have currently placed in unregistered provision.
Yeah, we've currently got 8 children in unregistered, it's been a pretty stable number. Obviously, our ambition is to have 0 in unregistered, and we are working on the basis of moving all of those young people as soon as we have sufficiency developed.
Thank you, sir. But from the earlier answers, do I take that those 8 children, it's not been the same 8 children the whole time? It's been a bit of a flux.
Yeah, exactly that. It's, where we take the opportunity to move a young person into registered, we absolutely will do that as soon as possible. So it is a different cohort of young people. Some may be the same, but some may not. But as soon as a young person, we've sourced an appropriate provision for them, they will be moved so that we can be ensured that they are registered.
Thank you. And just quickly, for my own understanding, what does unregistered provision for children look like at the moment?
Yeah, so they are usually small 1-2 bedroom, properties that home 1 or 2 children. They are effectively like a standard children's residential home. It's just they haven't got their formal Ofsted registration. A number of providers that we have got unregistered placements with are working towards an Ofsted registration, and we do have regular communication with Ofsted around each of those placements. Additionally, we have the social workers going out and visiting those homes to make sure that there's eyes on the young people and that we're satisfied, and we also have a quality assurance process whereby officers will go up, visit the homes and make sure that the care is as we would expect.
Thanks. So we're not just shoving the kids out to random basements and things?
No, absolutely not. No, they are high quality, they just aren't registered with Ofsted, and if we do ever have concerns, we will look to move those children immediately.
I see. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any more questions on this, David?
So I'd like to talk about CR26, the ICT resilience.
Yeah, I meant, when I said any more questions on this, I meant on CRR 55 before we move on, that you might have just preempted everything anyway. Okay, well thank you, Hannah, for your answers and stepping in at, I think, quite short notice. Okay, we'll move on to CRR 26, and David, if you want to ask your question now.
Thank you, Chair. So some of you might realise that I've been on Audit Committee for 3 years now. And this risk has been coming to Audit Committee for 3 years, funnily enough. One of the mitigating actions about moving shared drives to cloud, originally in March 22, was going to be finished in August 2022. And in March 23, it was going to be finished in November 23. And it's now slipped to December 2025. Can we have some idea about why it's taking so long to move stuff off the shared drive, please?
So I think you've been sent a response on this question, is that right, Akin?
Yes, Tim sent an email, comprehensive response regarding what's happening. I think you mentioned that there are about 3 projects going on. Perhaps it might be in a better place to explain it, but then I can forward this email also to justify the reasons comprehensively documented here, if you don't mind, please.
So I'm going to get a follow-up email. Okay.
Are you able to provide an overview, or is it very lengthy email?
It is quite lengthy.
Okay, we'll forward the email. Good bedtime meeting.
Yeah.
So if it can come from me and Alison, so we can get around the whole committee, that'd be great, because I think we've all got some concerns on this. So.
Thank you.
Lovely. Any other questions specifically on CRR 26? Patrick? Oh, okay. All right, well, we'll wait and see what's in that email, which is quite a comprehensive question, that has to be said, and follow up from there. Patrick, what's your question?
Thank you. I just had a quick question about the risk of harbour infrastructure failure, which is listed at the bottom of page 112. There's not a huge amount of context here, but it's an issue I'm quite interested in as it covers a lot of my ward. So I'm wondering if there are any big risks which have emerged relatively recently, or if we'll be getting any future briefings on this in future committee meetings. Thank you.
I think this is one of the risks where we start looking at the interconnectivity relating to the one with the highways and asset maintenance. So because there's already a plan to have budget and request to look at this particular risk is linked to the asset. So the colleagues' arguments felt that if we're able to get that going, hopefully they'll be able to resolve the harbour infrastructure as well.
So that's the relationship.
Okay, any more comments? Guy?
Thank you, Chair. And this one's on CRR59. I certainly wouldn't expect a detailed response here and now, but it would be helpful to have an update if at all possible. It's to do with failure to deliver timely statutory planning decisions. And I was just specifically interested, the final two causes listed are the overturns of officer recommendations by members of the DC committee and decisions made under delegated powers that are overturned by the planning inspectorate at appeal. I was curious as to how the outcome of the decisions were in some way delaying the decisions being made in a timely fashion at all. But I would also be very interested to know whether that refers specifically to what's sometimes called the members' cooling off period and the delays that that can bring to the process. So just an update on those two things would be very helpful if possible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your report. I've noticed one or two inconsistencies between the tables and the detailed summaries, but I'll drop you an email with regards to those, because I think it's just that transposing error. Yeah, thank you very much, and we'll move on. I think we're asked to review and comment, so we've reviewed and we've commented, and we shall move on to item 9, back up to item 9, which is the procurement compliance report from Neosha and Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Matt King, the Governance and Performance Manager within the Procurement and Contract Management Service. It's my colleague Nigel Ferguson, Head of Service. So this item is an update report on procurement compliance that's been noted by the committee. The report explains that in Q1 to 3 this financial year, there were 179 instances of non-compliance with the Council's procurement rules. The report sets out a number of management actions identified to address non-compliance, and there is a strong commitment from corporate leadership board around achieving those actions. The report confirms that the agreed management actions have been delivered or partly delivered, which is positive. There's evidence that we're starting to see positive effects from those management actions, but just to note that the nature of some of the process redesign work which is underway means that some of those actions may take some time to feed through into improved compliance figures. So the report also summarises the work the Procurement and Contract Management Service continues to do with service areas to bring about a significant reduction in the number of breaches. So to conclude, this report has been noted by the committee.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open it up for questions. And Jonathan, I can see your hand first, and then I think it's Audit.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is probably an obvious question, really, but the 179 breaches, what was the value of the orders that were placed in respect to those?
Bear with me, I'll try to see where to find that. That's 44 million.
Thank you. That does seem quite significant.
David?
Thank you, Chair. So, back in, when did we get that email? September, you gave us a briefing with some of that information inside it. Can we have an updated report listing which directorates are actually having the most breaches and things like that? Because I do think we need to do some analysis about what is going on within the various directorates about overspending or procurement breaching.
So yeah, so overspend is different to breaching, but yeah. So I think we can give a summary of those figures. Yeah, we should be able to give you an update on what we on the briefing we gave you back in October or whatever it was.
Thank you.
Any more comments or questions? think if we can have that update, that'd be really useful. I think I've certainly had members express to me concern that, you know, that procurement has been an issue for some time, that the issue of breaches has been one that's been identified in various papers to this committee, and you know, we appreciate that action has been taken and there's been changes and stuff, but we do still seem to, you know, you've identified 44 million today. So, you know, I think if we can see, have that updated report so that we can explore the data in more detail, that'd be useful.
Yeah, I think that can probably give you reassurance about why we have confidence that we have turned the corner with it. But yeah, that's absolutely, and we can provide that data.
I've got Guy.
Thanks. Two quick ones, Chair. Could you just tell us what the procurement level breach was for the previous year?
So percentage-wise, I think in the report we quote the figure as by number of decisions as 10%. I think in the report, as in for this financial year, quarter 1 to 3, as in that total number of procurement decisions, and of those, how many of those were breaches? That's 10%. And for the previous year, it was 16%. And that is one of the reasons why, one of the factors why we believe there is a significant improvement going on. So
having multi-years to look at would be really, really helpful in that context. So thank you for that. And my other question, apologies.
Sorry, Guy, Denise wants to come in, so Denise comes in on that.
Yes, at the end of the year you will have a full, more detailed report which will compare quarter-by-quarter analysis and also prior year's analysis. So generally mid-year we'd only give you an update. I think the reminder in terms of the date in which a number of the more rigid steps were introduced, which we'll see 1st of June, which is more around accountability, ownership and holding a number of officers to account. We have seen a significant reduction since the introduction of the new proposed approach, and you'll be able to see that when you look at the quarterly performance. I think the key point is, are we seeing a significant improvement? The view is yes, we are. Are the steps that we've stated that we were going to implement, have they been implemented? Yes, they have. So what we can then show you when we start to have a look at what are the residual issues that are causing breaches, then we can cover some of that as part of it. So in reality, we've probably lost about a month or two. So some of the fact that we still have a higher figure was prior to us introducing the more rigorous approach. And I can also give you some assurance that actually wherever there is a breach, there's a weekly report that comes to CLB every week where any officer that has been involved or the owner of a breach comes along to CLB to explain the position, be clear that they understand why there's been a breach, what are the steps that need to be taken and put into place. So those steps are in place. I would say a lot of what the team have been asked to introduce has actually been put into place, and I think what you want to be clear is that you're seeing the trend is moving in the right direction, that the numbers are going down, and at some point you're able to explain what is the frameworks and things that need to be in place to support that journey. So I'd say that there has been significant improvement, which is what Matt is trying to explain over each of the quarters. But at the end of the year, you'll have a full report that will actually produce all of that detail, etc. as well, and the directorates, the reasons why. But I think what you want to understand is what are the supplementary issues that are still maybe preventing the ability to ensure that 100% compliance is achieved, which is where we would want to aim for and the target we want to achieve going forward.
Thank you, Denise. That's very encouraging. Look forward to seeing the figures. I think that's really what we need for our assurance is the evidence. Guy, did you want to follow up, or has Denise responded now more fully?
My follow-up question was going to be, could we just get a very broad overview of the sort of relationship between the value of the individual breaches and the number of them themselves? In other words, are they roughly typical, same amount within each breach? Or, if one breach was 43.9 million, then that's the one we would probably choose to focus on. So I was just wondering, what did the sort of bell curve look like, as it were? Or the value of the largest breach?
I don't know if that off the top of my head, to be honest. I think that there is a very large range. There are breaches that are very small in value, and there are ones which are very substantial, which will have skewed that overall figure. So yeah, that's I can't give you a bell curve shape, but I can, yeah.
Okay, well, if we can ask Matt, when you do produce your report, that you are able to give the top 4 by directorate, or top 10 by directorate, top 10 by value, and start to break it down so we can have a look at that type of analysis as well, please, Matt.
Lovely, thank you. John?
Yeah, it was just following up on that really, just to make sure that the values were also identified, because obviously half the number of breaches is great, but if the value went from 24 million last year to 44 million this year, that's obviously, in the absence of any financials in this, could make somebody suspicious that actually the values have gone through the roof and we're just promoting the good news story. So I'm sure that's not the case, but if the values could be, and even if it was something like, even if you banded the values of the procurement value, so it was like, 0 to 1 million, 1 million to 5 or something, just to give us an idea by directorate and by procurement value what the trend was. Very useful.
Okay, yeah, I understand the point you make. I from memory, and I'm not wholly sure of this, but I think the breach rate by value last year was 6%, and this year it's 5%. So if that gives reassurance that there isn't a hidden set of very high value breaches this year.
Any further comments or queries from the... No? Lovely. Thank you for that update. We do look forward to the full year figures so that we can see those trends, because that's, I think, really what we're, as I'm sure you've identified, we're really aware what our primary concern is, but thank you for that. We're asking note the data and the actions underway to improve procurement compliance, so I shall tick that off my list, and we can move on to item 11, which is, or what was item 10, which is the update on Council's debt and arrears position from Kevin Smith and Graham Clapp.
Afternoon. My name is Graham Clapp. I'm the Head of Revenues and Benefits, and to my left I have Kevin Smith, who's the Income Collection Manager, if there are any questions that I'm not able to answer. So the agenda item is to note the internal debt and arrears update report for the period first half of this financial year, so April 23 to September 23, and the steps that are being taken as a part of our continued ethical approach to debt. So in a nutshell, good progress is being made on council tax, business rates and accounts receivable positions, with the brought forward debt for the year reducing significantly in the first half. So the figures are as follows. With regard to council tax, we started in April 23 with a figure of 50.5 million of brought forward debt, which we've reduced by the halfway point to 39.682 million, which is a reduction of just over 20%. On non-domestic rates, business rates, we started the year with a figure of 21.75 million, which we've reduced to 14.226 million, which is a reduction of just over a third, 34%. And on accounts receivable, we started the year with 76 million arrears, which we reduced by over 60% to just over 30 million at the halfway point, 30th of September. Obviously, these figures do not include the in-year arrears. This is arrears that were brought forward into this year. So what that means overall for those three figures, it's an overall reduction of around 43% when you take the three figures together. With regard to adult social care debts, they're now subject to a 3-stage cycle, which we are hoping to automate by April. Trade debts for adult social care are being passed to collection agents post-final notice if they're still unpaid. And we're working with our colleagues in ASC to look at any post-final notice options for service users where debts remain unpaid. Obviously, that's not an area we'd be looking to necessarily with collection agents. Cost of living crisis is still with us, but so far we've not seen the expected increase in personal insolvency during this year, but this may be because of the lagging cases being moved through the insolvency process by creditors. Also, it's potentially the additional support that has been provided by the government since the pandemic started in 2020, which will still be a factor. The total write-offs has increased from the immediately previous year as a result of the recovery action, and that continues to increase. Main categories of write-off include insolvency and abscon. We're continuing to work with our colleagues in ASC to determine old debts which are suitable for write-off, and subject to review of those cases, to increase the level of write-offs in this area by the end of the year. We're also looking to increase probity around invoicing for accounts receivable by decentralising that to service budget from the start of the new financial year, which hopefully should lead to a reduction in arrears. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I can see David's hand.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got two questions, mostly around page 76. On table 1, it lists the accounts receivable outstanding debt as £67 million, which is 36% of the overall debt. But you have a caveat about this figure is subject to annual fluctuations as these debt types are billed or invoiced on an as-required basis. Why is it done on an as-required basis? Surely we want to try and recover that debt by default, not as required, please.
Good afternoon, Councillor. The answer to that is that it depends on when a customer takes a service from us. So quite simply, if someone rings up and asks to hire a room for a specific event, the invoice is raised at that point. Because that invoice is raised in October 23, that may not be raised next year, maybe a one-off event. So the level of invoices raised, the value of the invoices that are raised changes year by year. So it's not like council tax where we issue 200,000 bills for a set amount. The actual volume and value does vary year by year.
So just to clear my understanding of that, so it's done on an as-required basis. You mean that it's when the actual invoice is submitted or set up from the council, which is why it fluctuates?
Yeah, so things like commercial rent, for instance, that is on lease, they're recurring, so quarterly invoices would go on as required. It's where there's one-off things, a wedding held at City Hall, we'd issue an invoice this year. That same person wouldn't arrange a wedding next year, probably, which means that if that was the only extra invoice this year, the value of invoices this year would be greater than the value of the invoices issued next year. Help.
Okay, thank you for that. I think I understand. The other question is on paragraph 4.3 about accounts receivable. You say on the 1st of April 2023 it was 76 million, which matches the value on table 2. But then it's saying it had reduced by 30 million by the 30th of September 2023. But if I follow through that bottom figure, it says 67 million. So I don't understand where you got that value it reducing by 30 million from, please.
So table 1 shows outstanding debt, including current year arrears. That is indebtedness at that point, 30th of September. Accounts receivable part of that was 76 million brought forward on the 1st of April, and at the 30th of September, that had reduced to 30.429. That 30.429 million doesn't include any arrears from 23-24. Right. I will try to make that clearer in future versions of the report.
If you could, please.
Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair. I think the figure, the outstanding balance for accounts receivable is clearly material. Out of interest, what are the terms of payment? Is it 30 days?
Most invoices are 30 days.
Yeah. So I've calculated the average number of days outstanding on accounts receivable debts at the 30th of September to be 154 days. And the methodology which I've used for that is quite simple. There were 59,784 invoices raised in Q1 and Q2, and those amounted to 78,629,000. So 78.6 million is 180 days, so 67.2 million is 154 days. That does seem, and I do note that that is a reduction from the position at the 31st of March, where the days outstanding was 173. But it does seem very high relative to a 30-day payment term.
Thank you, Councillor. We do actually report corporately on average days paid for invoices. And forgive me, I haven't got the number in front of me. It's approximately 90 days at the moment. What I will say is that obviously our drive is to reduce that number, but there's a reverse correlation between collecting older debt and the average days taken to pay an invoice.
Thank you. I have another question, if you don't mind. So the accounts receivable balance of 67.2 million, that is, I believe that the largest item is adult social care. What are the other main items within there?
Difficult to say. Commercial rent is probably a large one. Adult social care, as you've mentioned. Licensing potentially. I can certainly do some more detail and get that over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it would be good to see that. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more questions? Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. The graph of housing revenue account arrears on page 87 of the pack shows a very large spike in the 23-24 arrears, which doesn't seem to have any similarities in any of the other years. I was just wondering why that might be.
Thank you, Councillor. Is that figure 6?
Yes.
Yes, there is a note in there at there is a note in there. But effectively, it's the move of service charge and leasehold debt from the corporate financial system, Unit 4, back to Civica CX in housing. So there'll be a corresponding reduction in on the accounts receivable side, effectively.
Okay, thank you. I missed that.
Guy?
Excuse me, Chair.
Sorry.
If I just clarify, I found the comment. Sorry. Point 443 in the report. Thank you, Chair. Apologies.
Sarah? Okay, Guy.
Thanks, Chair. It's just in relation to the some of the write-offs, and I was looking particularly at page 99. Most of the write-offs are kind of understandable just in terms of plain English, but the ones on page 99, I'm afraid, have caught me. I was just wondering if you could characterise how encompassing that table is. Penalty charge notices suggest to me almost any kind of, I wouldn't say fine, but any charge the council might levy, and that didn't seem exhaustive in terms of those. And I was just wondering, when it says the cause is listed under write-off description, I just wasn't sure how that was being happened. Does this refer to the agency writing it off? What do these refer to?
Thank you, Councillor. So in the report, you have a list of write-offs by areas, accounts receivable, accounts tax, etc. I do apologise. Penalty charge notices should have said parking services, penalty charge notices. So So those are parking fines effectively.
Thank you. No, that's very helpful. In which case, when it's something like, for example, post-enforcement agent, what does that refer to in terms of that write-off? Is that the title of an officer that makes, that does it, in terms of, what does that refer to?
Those figures are correct. I'm not able to provide any further information on that at this point.
I think they're asking for an explanation of the title, Kevin, so that's after an enforcement agent has visited or reviewed and recommending the write-off, I'm assuming. So they're asking for what does post-enforcement agent mean in this context?
Yeah, so that would be cases that are unable to be collected.
After an enforcement agent has visited?
After an enforcement agent has visited, yes.
Could we just be provided with a short narrative explaining what each of those refers to? I'm sure foreign vehicle or driver, I'm sure refers to the reason that a fine is unrecoverable, and that's completely understandable. Other is obviously a catch-all item. But it would be good to have a sense of the process and the decision-making process, particularly around, especially when we're talking more than £1 million, what criteria are being used for those write-offs, where those decisions are being made. Is that okay?
The corporate debt management policy is on the council's website, so those write-offs will be made in accordance with that policy. However, yes, I can get you some more detail.
Yeah, if you can circulate that via Alison so that we can circulate it to the whole committee, that'd be great. Thank you. I saw Patrick and then Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. One more thing from me. Page 93, we have of the main pack, we have a list of different actions that the recovery team do to recover the debt, including things like outreach clinics and so on. I'm sure we'd all agree these are valuable, these are very valuable and important, but I was wondering what the ratio of debt recovered against the cost of putting these events and services on would be.
I can certainly look to provide that information for you. It's not something I've got with me today.
Thanks. And Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm looking at the table at the top of page 80, which splits payments for council tax between direct debit and other payment methods. And direct debit is 61.54%, other is 38.46%. I'm quite surprised that direct debit isn't higher than that. I would have expected virtually everybody to pay their council tax by direct debit. What are the main sort of other methods? There's hardly anybody uses cheques anymore, so how else do you collect council tax?
Thank you, Councillor. It's the second table is probably the more relevant one, which shows 72.37%. That excludes any what we call nil bills, where someone hasn't got any council tax to pay. The main other payment methods will be people paying cash off, post office, PayPoint, PayZone, transfer by online banking, paying via our website direct, ringing up and making a payment over the telephone, payments via outside agencies. Probably covers most of it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, even the, I must say, even the second table, the figure for direct debit is lower than I would have expected, but thanks for that.
Can I just add something else? I do apologise, Chair. Councillor, you'll find that we're one of the highest of the core cities at 72%, which is really good. And we are actively going to run a promotion, DD promotion campaign to try and make that figure even better.
Thank you for that. I think it's easy sometimes to forget that not everybody feels confident in the direct debit system or necessarily has feels that their account will always be able to support a direct debit coming out at any given time, and that probably drives people using other means of payment. I had some questions, and and only one of them I think has been picked up so far. So I'm going to abuse chair's privilege and try and throw them at you. So the first was about there's a comment in 3.1.4 about collection rates, and it's commenting on how activity has returned to pre-pandemic levels, but the ongoing cost of living crisis and whatnot, it's likely that collection rates will not return to pre-pandemic levels until 2024-25. And I wondered if you could unpack that a little, because I found that a little bit difficult to square with some of the tables which showed much lower collection rates, and I think returning to pre-pandemic levels looked like it'd be quite a significant jump in the next year or so. So can you maybe comment a little bit on the expectations around that?
It has taken some time to move all cases through the recovery and collection programme. We do feel that we've sort of passed the point of catch-up in terms of that, which means that now we have the ability to take any required action to collect outstanding sums. So, you know, we are hopeful that collection rate out through this year will be improved next year.
Okay, thank you. I then there was a couple of questions already around about comment 4.3 and the sort of comparison of figures year on year or year end to the point of the update. And I just wanted to ask you, so 4.3 talks about the sum outstanding in respect of arrears brought forward and how it's reduced to the 30th of September 2023. I just wondered if there was any specific targets and how we've compared, how we, performed against targets on that, because obviously that's a significant reduction, which is welcome, but are we beyond where we expected to be?
In terms of accounts receivable, we are slightly behind in both current year and arrears collection, but we do hope to catch that up and hit end of year target.
Okay, thank you. And then I wanted to sort of wondered if you could maybe unpack a little bit, because it's one thing, I guess, comparing the situation against the start of the year, but I looked to compare the situation at the end of September with the previous end of September, and there has been a rise of there's been a rise in the amount outstanding since the previous September update of around about 5 million. So again, is that just driven by the increase in value of invoices outstanding, or is there some other factor at play?
I'd refer back to the earlier conversation around how invoices are raised and when invoices are raised. It's quite possible that what we found earlier this year is that we've raised really large invoices towards the end of the month, which means that percentage collection was reduced, yet those invoices were paid the following month, which then increased collection again. So sometimes it's around timing of when the invoices are produced. I think one of the councillors mentioned earlier about the percentage or value of adult social care debt, and obviously that continues to increase, albeit slowly, and that obviously does have an effect as well. But we are trying all avenues to collect the sums that are outstanding, and they are moving through, as Graham was saying, they are moving through this 3-stage process now. And because we've now instigated that for adult social care debts and hope to automate it by April, that we think there's a great chance of increased collection from that avenue.
Okay, and the final question from me. So obviously you did a lot of information about outstanding debts to the council, including PCNs, but it doesn't include any information on clean air zone collections or penalties. We have now had the first reports into those published a couple of weeks ago. Will future iterations of this report start incorporating it in clean air zone receipts?
yeah, I fully intend to include that in future reports. Obviously, I didn't this time around because it hadn't been published at that point. Be interested in taking a view on whether you want just one figure for parking services or whether you'd like clean air zone statistics split out as well.
I mean, I would suggest split out. I think it's important to be aware of what's being collected in terms of fee versus penalties, and I'm not seeing any dissenting and shakes of the head from my colleagues either. Okay, that was all my questions. If there's no more comments or questions on this, then we're asked to note the position and steps being taken as part of the continued ethical approach to debt collection. So thank you very much. We'll note that and we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is Simba's internal audit update report for this month.
Thank you, Chair. This report is in two parts. The first part is just my general update, and the second part is the exception report. So in terms of the first part, the committee received detailed reports in November about internal audit and fraud, telling you about the outcomes and what's being planned. So the purpose of this update is just to give you an indication in terms of where we are with the plan. So at this point in time, we are working reasonably well to have the audit priorities being completed. We are also working towards the annual governance statement that you will approve in June, and then we are starting engagement with senior management and ourselves to plan for Q1 priorities, which we need to agree in March. And in that meeting, we will then explain in terms of how we have formulated the plan and the key issues coming from the plan. However, in this report, I want to just comment about the implementation of agreed actions. You see that this is below the target of 90%. We have had conversations with CLB. They are prioritizing this, but this is an area that is concerning, although there could be some reasons why that we are struggling to get this, but the thing that we need to improve. And I have indicated in the report some of the things that we need to focus on, particularly around making sure that the services are prioritizing the actions and making sure that they maximize the opportunities that are brought by Pentana, because the actions are already there, so the services need to proactively monitor rather than to rely on internal audit to come and give them a report. But there is traction at CLB, and I'm sure that we'll get there, but this is an area that we need to continuously look at, and I'll say probably more when I bring another detailed report to you as part of the annual report. I'll end here and take any questions on the first part.
Okay, Simon.
Just a very quick question. You mentioned below target in terms of implementing recommendations, but I suppose the key question is: are the ones that have missed significant ones, or are you still content overall?
This is evolving. I mean, the reason why probably you remember that for the first 2 quarters we were hitting the target. And I think there's been a lot of effort that has been put forward through implementing actions that were outstanding from previous years. So I think where we are, I think most of the actions that are outstanding now are within the current financial year state. So I'm a bit okay in terms of where we are, but it's an area that we really need to focus on because it indicates something that we need to deal with, particularly around the way we are using the actions as part of improving the business. It mustn't just be a process of implementing actions, but using those actions to proactively help us as part of good governance.
Are there any more comments or questions on the general report? Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. From table 2, I noticed that the directorate with the highest number of actions not yet implemented is children and families, which is 26%. we looked at the report on procurement breaches earlier, and that report indicated that that directorate also has the highest number of procurement breaches. So I just wondered if this is something that we need to be concerned about, if there's a relationship between the two, or if there's basically no relationship here.
I don't have an answer for that. That councillor, on the basis that there are two distinct areas, and I think some of the pressure that they are seeing within children, I think, which have been explained around non-compliance with the procurement rules, relates to the pressures in that space. But I think in this area, you've noticed that previously, they were the ones who had the highest implementation rates. I think they've slipped, I think, in terms of the performance, but last time they were in a better position. So I would have thought in terms of actions, they are in the same boat as everybody, but they probably are falling behind. They need to prioritize. But in terms of trying to bring the two and make a conclusion, I think at this point in time, I wouldn't be able to comment on the relationship.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Yeah, Denise, if you come in now.
I was going to suggest it may be something that you may want to refer to your People Scrutiny Commission. Actually, if you align that also to the area with the largest overspend, such as well, there's probably a number of trends that you'd want the People Scrutiny Commission to bring together and start to explore in some of their performance reviews.
Thanks. Well, I'll take that as an action for me to contact the People Scrutiny Chair. But also, I was going to say we will have the Children's and Families Transformation Programme update now next month or March, and it might be something that you might want to ask how that programme is taking into account outstanding recommendations and also the issue of the invoices. Are there any more questions on the report as it stands? Okay, we're going to move on to the no assurance report, which this is the first no assurance report I've seen, so they don't come along very often. It's probably important, it's vitally important that we look at it in full, but what I am going to say is I'd like to just remind people that it's about the governance and controls in place in administrating the monies for the refugee resettlement programmes as part of our responsibilities, and not issues of policy that we need to be looking at. So, Simba, back to you.
Yeah, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Neil to introduce the exception report, and then you and Meta, the directors, are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So on page 106 of the pack of papers, you can see there the summary report on the review that we've done around refugee resettlement and cash handling for persons with no recourse to public funds. In the middle of the page, you can see our audit opinion, and that is one of no assurance that effective governance arrangements are in place around refugee resettlement schemes and the associated financial controls for cash support provided to those persons. As you've heard from the introduction, that is a rare opinion and reflects that there is a generally poor control environment and therefore service objectives are at significant risk. There were two objectives in our work. Firstly, to look at the governance of claims for refugee resettlement, so how approvals are obtained and grant requirements met. And then the second one was looking at the controls over the financial support provided to those without public recourse to public funds. In terms of the key findings, there were three areas that generated high priority findings in our work. Firstly, the single point of failure, so not just in terms of continuity and resilience in terms of the control environment, but critically in our view around the segregation of duties. so particularly when fundamental when handling cash. The second area was around the evidence and corporate documentation to support the cash management process, so the evidence of controls and responsibilities being appropriately discharged. And thirdly and finally, the actual access to and security of the cash. So those are the three high priority findings. You can see on page 108 of the pack the 7 management actions that have been put forward. They've all been accepted by management and are underway. Pause there. Take any questions?
Right, I understand we're getting that you're going to make a further statement.
Okay, thank you very much. So, good afternoon, Committee. I'm Medical Director at Adult Social Care in the area of refugee resettlement and support for asylum seekers. Sits currently within Adult Social Care, but of course stretches, of course, a number of directorates. Needless to say, we take this report very, very seriously. And immediate action has been taken, as you will see from the report in your pack, to address both immediate, medium-term and long-term governance issues. The first step we took was to recruit some additional capacity, so I believe there is was an issue with oversight of this area of service. It's a fairly new one to my particular area of responsibility, but also some of the context here, which is I think very important, is that over the 5 to 6 years, the numbers of people that we are supporting in these areas of work has multiplied tenfold. So on reviewing the report and assessing the service, I became concerned that there wasn't sufficient capacity in our systems, and our governance arrangements have not kept up with the volume of work that we're doing to support all the good work that these teams are doing. So we have recruited additional oversight capacity and improvement capacity. We're making really good progress on the action plan. Additional admin support is in place to help us manage the transactions around cash. We will, by the end of this week, have reduced the amount of cash that we're handling by 50% by introducing prepaid cards. So that process was already underway, but the amount of resource that we had to progress that was reduced. So really good progress is being made on that. Work is also underway, which will be approved by the end of this week, to put in place a governance and assurance framework, and training will be rolled out on that over the next few weeks. The management oversight is strengthening the decision-making and governance that we have around income and expenditure around the refugee resettlement grant monies, which facilitates this area of work. That for me gives me significant confidence that we've made good progress. On an operational level, we've also completed all of the support plans. In fact, I've had confirmation this morning that all of the support plans that were outstanding have been completed before committee today. I would like to reassure the committee both of our commitment to making sure that we undertake these improvements, but also give you confidence on the progress that's been made to date. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a list of people now. John, then Simon, then David.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. There seems to be a few things in this that, whilst it's great that progress is being made, some of the things just seems like common sense, such as record keeping and signing things off. And so, from an assurance point of view, it's difficult really to have assurance, not that you're making progress and the right things are now being done, but assurance that some of these basics weren't even done in the first place. But around the prepayment cards, which is a great idea, can we be assured that the card numbers are going to be recorded? Because otherwise a prepaid card is as good as a £10 note.
I can confirm that we are, of course, working very closely with our finance colleagues to make sure that the relevant procedures are being followed for that. So yes, I'd like to give confirmation of that.
Thank you. Simon?
It was a couple of questions. On the action plan, there's the recommendation that's showing as implemented and shows 31st of 12th, 24. So I'm just assuming that means 23.
Yes,
And it is implemented.
Indeed, it has been, yes.
And I just wondered, as the chair said, this is the first time we've received a no assurance report. Whether, given the date on the actions are all relatively soon, in fact, a couple are coming up now, whether there's an opportunity to have a report back on that, perhaps verified by the auditor before the year end. I'm just thinking about the impact on the year end opinion as well.
Simba?
Yes, Chair, I think we will do an immediate follow-up now, given the request by the Audit Committee to give a report in the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. David?
Thank you, Chair. On paragraph 1.2, it says that the Council already runs similar schemes for asylum seekers and victims of domestic violence. How come lessons for both those schemes weren't learnt for delivering this project for refugee resettlement? Do we need to look at the asylum seekers and victims of domestic violence schemes as well?
Excuse me, Councillor, I'm not quite sure I've completely understood your question. I certainly would say that in reference to how this particular area handles cash, there will be other areas of the council that handles cash, but I wouldn't want to make a comment on that. That's probably not for me to say. So I'm not sure I've understood your question correctly.
So my point was that we're already doing it for different other sections of society. So why is this different for refugees?
My answer to that would be that it isn't different for refugees. We need to do with refugees as well as we do it elsewhere. So the point for me was that this area had not put in place adequate protocols that already exist and should have been being used and were not sufficiently being implemented.
Okay. Do we need to look at the areas of asylum seekers and domestic violence to find out whether making sure that they're receiving the best possible service as well?
So the audit was specific to this, but at the moment there's a project that's actually looking at how we handle cash across the organization. So we will need to look at that, and then we can see whether there's a relationship. We'll go and check, and if there's substantial information for us to do an audit work, we'll do. But if you are assured by preliminary, then I'll write and confirm the decision. But we'll go and I don't want to give a confirmed position now. We'll go and review the situation, and then if there's anything that requires us to do additional work, then we'll do. If not, I'll like to confirm.
Would you be in a position to include initial assessment as to whether further audit is required in those other areas in your quarterly report or in the annual audit plan that comes to our next meeting?
Yeah, that's fine. That's okay. That's fine.
Lovely. Thank you. Denise.
To say that many of those areas have been audited in the past and the processes and approach were deemed adequate at the time. I think this is the first area where we've received a no assurance report for a number of years. Again, I wouldn't want you to anticipate that this is this is a common occurrence. It isn't. So I think Meta needs to obviously reflect on what it is that in the setup of this arrangement for this new cohort that was different and why those protocols weren't put into place. I recognise there was a need for pace, etc. as part of that, and actually in supporting and setting up the team quickly to be able to support those client groups, but actually the protocols are there and could have been utilised and such as well, so it is something to think about. But clearly, once our internal audit team do a little bit more of a follow-up, they can see if there's anything more that we need to do much more broadly. But those areas have been subject to audits previously, but they've got long-standing arrangements in relation to asylum seekers, etc. as well.
Thanks, Denise. I've got Guy and then Patrick, and then Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. But Denise just answered my question perfectly. Thanks.
Excellent. Premonition powers there, Denise. Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. I recognise this is almost secondary to the fact of the poor handling of cash in the first place, but just for the information, how much is this cash support programme worth to the council? Like, how much money do we spend on it?
I would have to come back to you on the actual figure, to be honest. I haven't got that in front of me, but I'll put it to supply that to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Patrick's just asked my question, actually, Chair. Lovely. I've got a couple of questions. One is, I guess, policies and procedures is one thing, but I'm concerned about to the extent to which there's the culture in the team has maybe not been right, and whether you feel that is that element is being sort of adequately addressed through the training and and implementation of new procedures.
I believe that insufficient management oversight has been a problem in the past. It's one of the wider areas we're addressing with other areas of work that sits outside of this report, which includes looking at corporate oversight of this whole area of work, but also from me as responsible for the operations, making sure that we have adequate resources and adequate management oversight in place going forward. So that's very much part of the work we'll be doing that sits in addition to what's in the report.
Thank you. Are there any more questions on this? Not seeing any hands. Thank you for presenting the report, and thank you very much for coming to answer questions. That's appreciated, and we'll be following this up to get assurance that it has been fully addressed. So we are asked to note the General Internal Audit Update Report and receive assurance on actions being taken to complete agreed priorities for the rest of the year. And then we're also asked to note the Internal Audit Summary Report and take assurance from management regarding the issues highlighted in that. So I'm going to consider that done. And we'll move on to the Property Management Programme Update from Pete. It looks like John's going to introduce him.
Chair, so we're in your hands about how you want to handle it. I'm conscious of time, so we'll probably just say a couple of things and then take questions. Does that work for you?
Yes, I'm sure there are questions.
Of course. No. Well, we're happy to go straight to that. I was just going to say a couple of things about the risks and issues that we've been grappling with. So, in terms of the programme, it obviously has two twin aims really, one of which is realising capital receipts, and the other one is securing revenue savings in the context, obviously, of the very challenging financial situation for the council. The key risks and issues which I just flag, and then very happy, Peter, we just go straight to questions, is to secure value and to make sure that we are making sure we're getting the very best value for the council in what a very challenging property market. So Pete and myself and the team are very conscious of that and trying to phase the approach as much as possible whilst meeting the requirements of the capital receipts element from time to time. That does vary from time to time as the capital programme develops, but that's the approach we've taken. We've made sure we've considered all appropriate uses for any assets for disposal work with, in particular, the three other top four programmes, temporary accommodation, adults and children's, and we've really focused on trying to enhance the links with those other programmes and making sure that we're considering all assets for potential other uses within the council first. There was an established process for that actually, but we've enhanced the joint working. See Hugh's still here to show his interest and support. And another key risk really is trying to balance that tension between realising capital receipts and the fact that we have got a challenging revenue target. As is flagged in the report, we aren't quite going to make the revenue target in terms of revenue savings this year. We're hoping to get close to that next year, but that is obviously a tension between needing to protect, to achieve the capital savings and not further put pressure on the revenue. So Chair, that was the only thing I want to highlight really. We're obviously happy to introduce the report further, but if you're happy to move straight to questions, we will.
Thank you. Yeah, if we move to questions, because everyone will read the report, I'm sure. Anybody got any questions to kick us off? Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wonder if you could explain what sort of, just in high-level terms, what sort of criteria is applied to determine which properties should be disposed of. Do you look first at the high-value properties, for example? There's I think there's a former housing office in my ward which has been empty for about 4 or 5 years, and nothing seems to be happening with it. I guess in terms of the council's portfolio of property, it's not one of the higher value properties, but it just appears as though it's left empty, and there's just nothing which is ever done there. I've also got an example of a resident who contacted me who was interested in buying a piece of council-owned land which basically wasn't used for anything. The resident offered to pay the conveyancing charges, any legal fees, and so the council would have been released from any maintenance of that land. But the answer that came back was that the council weren't really interested in selling it because they didn't have the capacity to deal with the transaction. So I think it would be helpful to have an indication of the criteria that's used to determine how properties are identified that are suitable for disposal.
Thanks, Councillor. Pete Anderson, the Director of Property and Assets and Infrastructure. From a selection perspective, I guess we look at it from two lenses. One, from a corporate landlord approach, so property services, having an intelligent view of all of our assets from development, investment and the operational estate, and from which, in terms of what we know in relation to its occupancy, in terms of how it should currently use, the costs, etc., looking at it from an R&M, from energy, and in terms of that roll-in repairs and maintenance pipeline. What we do and what we've done and tried to really focus on this through property transformation is to ensure that our services work with us and identify to us in the first instance their strategic asset management plan. So for the buildings up there, using primarily operationally in relation to whether they are declaring its service for requirements now or in the future, but also in terms of working with us when we are working together around office rationalisation. There is an ambition for us to look at locality solutions both within the council and with partners, but first and foremost, we as corporate property want to ensure that our assets are there being used primarily by the services in the best use possible. So we on quarterly, we follow a review process where we ask the questions around its use and how it can be used in the future. Clearly, if a property is void, or a property has been identified through our investment estate, where there might be the tenant might be have identified that they will be, the lease ends and they no longer require release. So there's an opportunity there from an investment estate perspective to consider the best option for us moving forward. So we first and foremost primarily look at it from a service perspective, and then we can go from there. And I think what this programme has taught us, but also has been really refreshing, is the engagement, and as John mentioned, with children's services, adult services and temporary accommodation, when we are aware of our assets that potentially could be used elsewhere and better and to save money in the organisation, then we need to consider that. In terms of...
I was just going to say, Councillor, if there's particular sites though, sorry, I want to cross your feet, but there's particular sites, you're always happy to talk about those. So if, Emily's here from the team, so Emily Hewitt, we'll, if you want to drop us a note with the specifics, we'll certainly pick that up.
Yes, thank you. I will do that. Thanks for the offer.
Thank you. I've got Guy next.
Thanks, Chair. Just to pick up the point that I raised earlier when we were talking about the external audit process, two of the items mentioned in that external audit process as being of significant risk was to do with the valuation of our estate and the valuation of our investment properties. I was hoping to ask you the same question, how you feel that piece of work being done currently in the run-up to March impacts on our thinking as an organisation around property disposals.
Do you want me to... So we, because of the tension, Councillor, that I mentioned earlier between the revenue and the capital situation, we, as a group, we're not particularly focusing on the investment estate currently, certainly where there's significant revenue from a particular asset. There are some elements where there isn't, or we've taken the view there isn't significant revenue that we've looked at that. But what we'd say around the valuation is, before we dispose of any asset, we get a specific and up-to-date valuation of that anyway. So whilst the timing issues might impact on the overall consideration of it, if it was significantly out of date, it wouldn't impact on the actual disposal value.
Thanks, John. I'm just going to sort of add my understanding, and I'm looking to Denise to correct me if I'm wrong, but what the external auditors are doing is assessing the valuations that the council has produced for its property in the 22-23 tax year. They're not valuing the properties from scratch. So, just for clarity. Do you want to? You got a supplementary? Go on.
Yeah, sorry, but my concern wasn't that Grant Thornton were going to be figuring out how much our properties were worth after we'd sold them. It was there a potential that that audit might throw up aspects of the way that those decisions were made, or the way that that valuation had been conducted that had learning for the disposals programme that's currently ongoing? Two factors are particularly foremost in my mind. One is, obviously, the land disposals are being driven more by the need for capital receipts to come in than it simply being a part of the normal rationalisation churn of the business, as it were. And in that context, I wonder if looking beyond the current value of those properties as to their potential future value might not be a very important part of that equation. I'm thinking particularly the sort of general increase in property prices and land values across the city. It might well be that something worth something right now might be worth significantly more in not too long. If that money is being brought into the council and was generated capital receipt, one would want to be sure that the ROI of that capital investment exceeded the increase in the value of the property disposal to fund it. But I'm not sure if that's part of that thinking. The other factor was uplift. Again, I'm not sure if this is part of our process in terms of the way that we value property, but obviously we sell property. Very often it gets developed, and that then tends to have a knock-on implication for the value of surrounding property. Again, I'm not sure if that knock-on effect is part of our calculation, but perhaps it could be, considering the sheer amount of property around the city that we own. Does that make sense?
I can see Denise coming to the rescue, so I'll happily leave it.
So,
does make sense to me, so I'm absolutely clear what you're referring to. There are a number of things at stake. So in relation to the accounts and the work that the external auditors will do, that's slightly different to the areas that you're focusing on. They're going to do the valuation to ensure that the carrying value, fair value or NBV that we have within the accounts are accurate, and they will use all of the relevant indices to verify and check that. So that's, if you separate that to the work that the property team should be doing in the areas they should be focusing on, they'll obviously have all of the different asset classifications. So you will have land, and there is a potential that it could go up, but it could also, it may not go up, it may go down, etc. as well. So you're obviously trying to think about what do we think will happen in the market and whether or not this is the right time for disposing of those land assets. So that is part of the assumption, but also we also think about the different capital receipts to be able to fund the existing capital programme as well. So it's a trade-off between the two. So some of that land could be land-backed assets as well. So, for example, a lot of the work that we do with Gorham, etc., will be land-backed. So the asset wouldn't be disposed of now. It would be transitioned into Gorham, and it would be, viewed at or valued at the time of the actual planning decision, or just before the planning decision when they've got an LLP. So you will actually gain from some of that uplift on future use as well as part of that. Then you've got the other category as well, where colleagues will look at. So you have investment property, which is probably a much easier decision in terms of whether you dispose, but part of that calculation will be the return, the initial return from revenue that would come from that investment property, etc., and whether or not those future revenue streams are more beneficial than the capital receipt that you could gain. When you get to your operational estate, that becomes even more complex, because you do have to think about the purpose, the use, the social value, the environmental value, and all of those other factors that are within that. I think in terms of the potential risks that could come through selling one asset, does that create a blight on other assets or decrease the value? Is there marriage value, etc.? You'd anticipate that that would come through your actual reports from your consultants that give you the market value at the time. So in reality, if we do ask them to have a look at the potential unintended consequences on wider programmes, then they would do that as well as part of the work. But we would only do that as part of a wider regeneration type project and approach. You wouldn't do that on all of the council's assets. It's where you think that there is a regeneration type benefit and work, etc. as well, that you'd want to do that. You wouldn't say, well, we're not going to sell our asset because an asset of which we don't own elsewhere within the, within the city would be devalued, etc. as well. But we obviously do that in terms of the council's assets, the council's own earnings as well as part of that. But there's a lot of things at stake, and actually some of that work will fall into the work of the team, but they will also do that in conjunction with finance as well as part of that, and their consultants will also report on that when they do the market value. Quite a lot there, but hopefully that covers some of the points.
One question, I promise, it's incredibly deep, but to whom? Do they report back to the Cabinet at the point that decision's made?
They would report back to the project team, because they would commission. They work with valuers, and they worked with a range of consultants who would give them the initial views in terms of the approach, but also values. And also it depends on the route to market. If they decide to go to an open market and some sort of an auction, then clearly you'll get the best value at the time. But some of those considerations around unintended consequences, which I think is where you're focusing on, will be considered by the project team, and they will discuss that with project board, programme board before progressing. Their pipeline that they present back to Cabinet for consideration will be after those things have hopefully been taken into consideration. They'll give you their recommended pipeline for disposal.
Thank you, Denise. David.
One last quick question, Chair. On the table on page 169 lists various work streams, one of which is a hard FM procurement. I'm assuming that the FM refers to facilities management. Am I correct?
Yes.
Why is it hard?
Because the works are physical to an asset, rather than soft FM, which would be, as you'll be familiar with, Bristol Workplace, around cleaning, security and cash in transit.
Okay, now I understand the difference. How big is that contract in terms of monetary value?
Annual spend about 8 million pound.
8 million.
£8 million. It's en route to Cabinet for a re-tendering process. The current provider is Launch Stewart.
And are Bristol Waste involved in that?
There's been conversations, but in relation to their ability to deliver a hard FM contract, they won't be able to deliver the requirements based on what we've pulled together.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions around about the governance and performance of the programme to date. So, I guess bluntly, are you on target?
I think John said in terms of revenue, we are slightly below target for this year from a pipeline of going into the next couple of years. From the capital receipts target for this year, we are tracking above target, which is really all credit to the team. And in terms of it, I think it demonstrates when you've got a whole council approach to this, it does make a huge difference. So I think we've taken 3 reports to Cabinet this year in relation to intended disposals, and we've got a report going in February also.
Okay, I think that's it. Any more questions? I see no further hands, so we are asked to note the status progress of the property programme, so I shall tick that, and we'll move on to look at the temporary accommodation programme, and that's John again.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just do similar if that's okay with you. So the paper sets out the key elements of the temporary accommodation programme and governance and risk and issues as per the previous one. The context of the programme is important, however, as I'm sure you're all aware, we do currently have a housing crisis in Bristol, and we're not alone in that nationally, but over 20,000 households on the housing waiting list and over 1,300 households in temporary accommodation. The paper sets out the saving target. The current situation on that, Chair, on the same basis you were just asking, is we're close to meeting the pure savings target for this current financial year, and we hope to exceed it over 2 years. But I have to say that's purely focusing on the savings target we've been setting rather than the pressures that have continued to develop. And they have continued to increase significantly. Caused by a variety of factors, including the increased fast tracking of asylum seekers from asylum hotels. We are working hard to bring forward further proposals to try and bring additional temporary accommodation capacity over the period to try and address that, but it remains a very challenging area. That's all I wanted to say by way of introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. You anticipated my question on the targets, because obviously I appreciate that in property is, things can be slower to realise, and I was going to ask a similar question on the targets, but you've kind of picked up on that already. Any questions from the committee on this report? I am seeing no hands. I'm going to ask a question around the resources going into delivering. I appreciate that pressures are increasing probably in excess of cash flow savings, but how much resource has gone into delivering the cash flow savings that have been committed for delivery this year?
That's a good question. I couldn't give you the exact figure, I'm afraid, Chair. So several £100,000. I'll come back to you with the exact figure.
Okay, thanks. Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. On page 176.3.5, talking about we're allocating some general needs housing for use as temporary accommodation, and that this is a temporary fix which will be reversed once more work streams deliver more housing supply. Are we confident that those other work streams will be delivering enough housing supply to enable us to shift that general needs housing back into general needs instead of being used for temporary accommodation?
That's a good question, Councillor. So the intention is that the shift from general needs allocation will be temporary, so that we will be making that change back. In terms of the programme, so we're trying to bring forward sufficient housing both to deal with that reduction but also the additional pressures. Whether it will be enough, I don't know. It's very challenging to be honest, but that's what we're working on.
Any other questions? I do have one, but I need to find my note which related to one of the earlier papers. So there was a note in the paper on here we go. So there was a note in the paper that we had on the arrears position for the council, that there was a identified and isolated a system error following introduction of new application interface for placements. This is with regards to temporary accommodation for placements after July 2023, and it resulted in key revenue not being currently allocated to client accounts. And I wondered if that had any impact on the transformation programme at all.
I'm sorry.
So
Could you refer to the...
Have you got the full pack there? I can give you the page number if so. It's on page 89 of the full pack.
Okay.
And it's 4.48 in the section headed up housing brackets temporary accommodation. And it talks about, it's talking about the
sorry, is it in the temporary accommodation paper itself, or?
Sorry?
So it's in a separate paper, is it?
It's a separate paper, yeah. It was a paper on debt. But there was this reference to a specific problem in July, identified in July 2023. I just wondered if it had any play into the ability to deliver savings as part of the transformation project.
The fact I'm not aware of it suggests hopefully not, but I'll come back to you on that.
Denise?
Yes, I will come in. It won't have had an impact. All of the debt is held corporately, not actually within the system, so it wouldn't have impacted on the savings.
Brilliant. Thank you, Denise. Thank you. Okay, if there's no further questions on that, we have been asked to note the progress made on the temporary accommodation programme, and we have done that, and that brings this month's meeting to a conclusion. Thank you very much to members for all your contributions. Thank you to officers for likewise for your contributions and support, and to the Grant Thornton team for sticking it out to the end, and to those in the public gallery likewise. Cheers.